Get back to our panel. With us in the studio is Atiba Madyun. He's a political analyst and strategic and president of the Madyun Group. Also with us from Beijing is Victor Gao. He is a Chinese international relations expert. Alexander Nekrassov, a former Kremlin advisor, joins us from London. And with us from New York is Raghida Dergham. She is a columnist and senior diplomatic correspondent for Hayat. Also on the set with us is Afshin Molavi. He is a fellow at the Foreign Policy Institute at Johns Hopkins University's School of Advanced International Studies. Atiba, in that speech, there was a big focus on rebuilding America's infrastructure. Donald Trump said, quoting here, "We've spent trillions and trillions of dollars overseas while America's infrastructure has fallen into disrepair." What did you read into that? No more expensive foreign wars, no more nation building. It's all going to be about the United States.
Well, he has a Congress that he can work with. So he has a majority. The question is, what is the direction? And I mean, he mentioned it, but how is he going? Where's he going to get those dollars? He talked about the middle class. The middle class has been an area where Democrats have largely focused on every political season throughout. But has the middle class grown? A lot of the people who feel as if they voted for Trump, they have put their interest and their beliefs that he's going to help them get out of the mess that we still are trying to clean up from the economic recession, which unfortunately was caused by Republicans. We can't get around that. So we'll see whether or not President Trump is able to do basically what we did during the Great Depression. What is it? How is it that we ended up being able to build and to be able to get the middle class going again? It was by investing in that middle class, by building buildings and building roads. Where that money is going to come from, because he said that our military is depleting, yet he said that we spend too much money abroad. So where is the money going to come from? Is it going to be is he going to tax people? Is he going to? He talked about corporations in terms of CEOs, in terms of how much money they make in the establishment. The question now is, what is he going to do, and how is he going to be able to take that money and reinvest it into that middle class in terms of how are we going to build more bridges? How are we going to increase and improve our infrastructure with airports? So there's a lot of things that he said that's in there. But the question is, how is he going to do it?
And on to Atika's point, it's a good one, because when you look at the history of American prosperity, and let's not forget, this is still the most prosperous country, the largest economy on earth, right? And a lot of that has to do with the infrastructure spending that we've seen in the post-World War II era. A lot of it also has to do with the unleashing of the private sector. And we do have a very high corporate tax rate here in the United States at 35%. And if he does bring it down to 20%, we will see some of the animal spirits, as they say, begin to be unleashed. And that combination, that could be a very interesting combination of infrastructure stimulus, coupled with corporate, tax cuts. We could see a nice pop in the U.S. economy here over the next couple of years.
But I guess the thing is that he has Congress on his side. He wants to rebuild roads, but he also wants to rebuild the military.
That's right.
So there's got to be some priorities there.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go to Raghida Dergham. Raghida, in one of the foreign policy references, Donald Trump talked about what he called Islamic terrorism. Let's watch.
We will reinforce old alliances and form new ones and unite the civilized world against radical Islamic terrorism, which we will eradicate completely from the face of the earth.
So tough words there from the new president, but what are his options right now, short of getting the United States involved in another full-scale war in the Middle East?
Well, he needs those Muslim countries in order to fight radicalism and terrorism by terrorist groups, in particular the Sunnis. He needs the Sunnis to fight this radical Islam that is referred to normally as a Sunni Shiite. I think he's now going to be looking at both from his point of view, and I think that's going to be rather new. The difference here is that will the President of the United States want to heat up, if you will, the Shiite-Sunni divide and cause more trouble and more war, or is he operate with those moderates and the terrorism and radicalism and see what to... This is the test that he's going to have to face. If you for positions, and including, for example, Gerald Mattis, you will see that there is a very big interest in reaching out for the Gulf states. That would, because see, President Obama, from the point of view of the Gulf states, was not good for them. That he embraced Iran and only Iran, and that he only, because of the nuclear deal with Iran, he sold them down the drain. that will be a different policies if embraced by President Trump, in which case it will improve the relationship with the Gulf states, and it will bring new dynamics into the regional battles, if you will, between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So I think it was all right to say we need to fight radicalism, of Islamic radicalism. Again, I repeat, it would have been nicer if he also said we will reach out to those in the Muslim world who are ready to fight them with us, instead of just leaving it as if Islam is only about radicalism.
Right, getting back to what you said about General Mattis, known colloquially here in the United States as Mad Dog Mattis. We're getting in some news that, yes, he has been confirmed as Defense Secretary. The Senate, the U.S. Senate, also confirmed John F. Kelly as Secretary of Homeland Security on Friday. Of course, those are two big national security appointments for the new Trump administration. Alexander, on foreign policy, there was one broad foreign policy statement made by Mr. Trump in today's speech. I'll read that to you. He said, "We will seek friendship and goodwill with the nations of the world, but we do so with the understanding that it is the right of all nations to put their own interests first. We do not seek to impose our way of life on anyone, but rather to let it shine as an example. We will shine for everyone to follow." How do you interpret that?
Well, I think that Donald Trump is saying to the world that we are going to look after our interests first, but you also have the right to do the same, which is quite, well, sort of a positive thing in itself, because he is giving other nations the right to defend their interests. But I think that generally speaking, we will see some sort of a modification of his announcements during his election campaign and during this specific speech, because he will be confronting reality, as I said, from Monday onwards. And I think that his administration has to be flexible, because in order for him to deliver on the economy, or his promises on the economy, on developing the American economy, he really needs to build his relations with other countries in a very organized and proper way. I think personally that, you know, when we talk about the difficulty for him in delivering his promises of new jobs and economic growth, I think there is actually a scope for him, because what we've seen under Obama, you know, nearly $5 trillion created by the US Fed, which was all wasted basically. None of the real economy got this money. I think if he works with the US Fed and Wall Street generally and stops this so-called virtual economy, when trillions of dollars are basically gambled on the markets and not invested into the real economy, I think there he will find quite a lot of money. With Russia specifically, I think that there is potential for economic development on both sides. I think that there is, you know, the knowledge of some of the members of his new administration, specifically Rex Tillerson. I think there is huge potential for trade and economic growth with Russia. I think that Russia will be able also in a way to become the middleman between Washington and Beijing, because this is something I think that Putin and his administration have been hinting at, you know, not directly but indirectly. And I think that Trump would be wise to use this also with Iran as well as the middleman, Russia. So I think in this case, I think there is a huge potential. And I caution again about these, you know, some extreme statements that he has made today in his speech. I think this will soften. You know, every new leader, especially Trump, who has no expertise in politics, he's never done any public job before, I think he will be finding in the first 3 months,
right,
he will be growing into his job along with his administration. And you will see a lot of his policies, which he announced, will be changing, will be becoming different, will be, you know, the angles will change and so on. So I caution everybody against, you know, making definite conclusions on the basis of his speech today.
Right, Raghida, I'm going to get to you in a moment. I know you want to say something, but I just want to get Victor's take on...
as a follow-up on this.
Yeah, okay. I just want to get Victor's take on what Alexander has been saying. Victor, when we look at the foreign policy priorities for the new administration here in Washington, where does China feature in this? Do you see an early meeting between President Trump and President Xi Jinping?
Well, first of all, I think there seems to be a contradiction between the domestic agenda for President Trump and his international agenda. Yeah. Mainly because if he really wants to make America great again, then he needs to mobilize all the resources in the world, including the big resources here in China, to help America achieve the goal of making America great again. In this way, I think China actually can provide a lot of help. China has the largest pool of financial resources, the execution skills, and the largest market, which can help the United States to sell more goods and services. Therefore, he cannot just beat up on China on many important issues on the international stage, while he wants to achieve making America great again. President Donald Trump can better achieve the goal of making America great again by leveraging off all the resources and competitive edge of China. Now, talking about America first, yes, indeed, everyone wants to be first. And however, you need to be realistic. For example, in terms of the iron and steel production, the United States is lagging far behind China, and it's possibly never possible for the United States to be #1 iron and steel producer in the world. Therefore, you need to be very much objective. China produces more cars than the United States. Therefore, the United States probably should not pursue the goal of being the #1 car maker in the world. And America produces very good Boeing plane, but if you write off China as the largest market for Boeing plane, Boeing company will collapse very easily. Therefore, President Donald Trump needs to build up a consistency in his domestic agenda and the international agenda. And as far as China is concerned, China wants to help. China wants to be fully engaged with the new administration in the United States to help them achieve the goal of making America great again. But that should be preconditioned that that goal to be achieved should not make the world less great. It should be both be made great again in the coming 4 years.
Right, which gets back to the speech that was made by President Xi at the World Economic Forum. Raghida, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that I expect the relationship between the United States and China to be most contentious, really, if the attitude remains that you need to do this and you need to do that. From both sides. I believe that there has to be a better communication between these two big, great countries because I think that Donald Trump is coming in with an opening statement, if you will, in a negotiating process. He is asking for something from China. He is saying business is not going to be as usual and there are adjustments to be made. I don't think he is going to go into a total clash with China unless he finds himself painted against the wall. That's on one hand. On the other hand, and this is what I wanted to come in about when Alexander was speaking, I think the first test that we are going to see in the relationship between President Trump and President Putin is going to be in Astana in 3 days. This is where there's this meeting on Syria. Now, it depends. I know that the Russians are very eager. President Putin is very eager to have that grand bargain, and he feels that he's got, you know, President Trump on his side, basically, because he's ready for that. He's ready to, again, the art of the deal. But I think there's going to be details that are going to be rather tricky, particularly because of if it is a grand bargain, who's carving what for oneself. So basically, I think the first foreign policy issue that's going to come to President Trump's administration is in 3 days through the Astana meeting, that is Syria, and then it's going to come here to the United Nations. Now, then again, here, the UN is not a big body making, big body for policy making, but it's a place where you will see where the Chinese position themselves, where the Russians take another position through a veto or otherwise, in the dynamics and the relationship between the ambassador, the new ambassador of the Trump administration, and the good old ambassadors here who are going to hear her. You know, remember, she said that crimes against humanity were committed by Russia. So, you know, this is going to be a new dynamic. And again, I want to repeat, it depends how much does Donald Trump listen to his ministers. If he is not going to listen, if he's going to say, never mind, I know better, I know how to do a deal, then we're going to have a very different America, and we're going to have a very worrying America.
Raghida, I want to take a break, but very quickly, you've covered the United Nations for years. You're a seasoned correspondent there. Looking at this inward posture, if I could put it that way, that Donald Trump is adopting right now, how do you think he's going to be, or his administration is going to be received at the United Nations? Is it going to become part of the group? Is it going to work with other countries to push the UN agenda forward, or is it going to take its own road?
I think the new Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, is going to be a very important player here because of his personality. He is a man who knows how to deal around these problems. But I think if, you know, President Trump goes ahead and cuts the financial, the contributions to the United Nations, guess what? And maybe Victor could confirm that. I think China is willing to come in and say, I'll buy that influence. I'll take that. So he's got to be careful that, you know, don't cut your nose to spite your face here. And then the next thing that probably they're going to be talking about is Jerusalem, moving the embassy to Jerusalem in light of that United Nations resolution here on settlements. I don't think there's going to be any reneging on that resolution, but I think that is going to be, again, the point where he's going to say, I'm going to teach the United Nations a lesson never again to produce a resolution like the one on settlements. I'm not so sure this will settle well with the United Nations at large. But I think it's not going to be an easy relationship with the UN because he doesn't like it. I remember he tried to renovate this place. He made an offer at that time when he was a businessman. He says, "Hey, give me the project to renovate the UN and to make it exactly what it should be for probably much less than the UN ended up paying." But they turned him down. So he may not like that as well. He may say, hey, listen, time to revenge.
Okay, we are going to take a break right now. Back with much more on this special edition of The Heat and the inauguration of the new President of the United States, Donald Trump. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.